So, Ashton, tell us the worst job you've ever had.
Yeah, so the worst job I had was being a bus driver. And it was a great company and everything, but I'm a terrible driver. And I don't really pay attention. I like to see what's going on. And so I missed stops and turns a lot. So it was pretty hectic. Yeah, I wasn't everyone's favorite.
And now you drive a van for your current job.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
At least it's just for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you more focused now that you're driving a van? Like, are you better now?
No. No, I'm a terrible driver. I'm always looking around. Oh, look at that. I didn't see it. Oh, it's my turn.
Well, everybody, thankfully, his name is on his van, so you can be warned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have one of those call-in lines? Be like, how's my driving?
Nope.
And you never will.
No.
That's
have it
wise.
call into my wife. Like,
That's
no.
good. Yeah, that's wise. The worst job I ever had, I got a job at this little local bookstore in the town when I was growing up, and took them forever to train me. And after they trained me, it took them forever to schedule me. And I think I got one shift, maybe two, before that bookstore went out of business.
Oh.
So not a great experience.
Oh, man.
Wow. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I think my the worst job I ever had, I was working. It was like working for a gentleman who had his own business, and he was cleaning people's chimneys. Was the business idea, and so my friend was working for him. Had been working for him for like a few weeks, and I got a job with him too. I got interviewed, got a job. It was great. Worked a few shifts, not a lot, and then me and my friend discovered he was just like scamming people. Basically, like he would like check out their chimneys and be like, oh, it's like so bad, you totally need clean, and like did not at all need any work done. And so we were pretty upset. Yeah, and so it became a whole big drama thing. But yeah, it was a very short-lived job. So that was scary because he was kind of crazy. He kind of went crazy.
So Jeff was part of a scam.
I guess I was part of a scam. Who knew?
We're learning a lot here.
Yeah, it was not on purpose.
Somehow hey, we're going to talk more about this idea of jobs and careers today on Deepish Thoughts. Welcome back to Deepish Thoughts. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Jeff. And we got a special guest with us today. We got our friend Ashton here. So I'm not going to give him too much introduction. He just comes to our church. We know him from here. But I'm going to give it over to Ashton to let him give a quick bio. So Ashton, why don't you introduce yourself? And yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Jamie and Jeff, for having me. This is awesome. My name is Ashton Van Heemst. I am married to Kara, and we have 3 boys, Wyatt, Warren, and Wayne. And it's a pretty crazy household. And as far as careers go, I've been working since I was about 13, 14, so worked about 20 years so far, and I've had like 4 kind of careers, if you will, or 4 large jobs, and just started my own business about a year ago, almost exactly. So that's my latest venture. But yeah, that's a little about me.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ashton. That's awesome. Well, we're grateful that you're on the podcast, and one of the reasons we wanted to have you on here is because, making a big career change is something that I think is both scary, and it's also kind of a real life experience, right? Mm-hmm. And it's something that I think people are pretty scared about, or maybe can be really nervous about, and so maybe they're thinking about making a job change themselves, or I think there's just a lot of questions around this. So thanks for being on the podcast, maybe to answer some of those questions and help us navigate that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you said I'd love to hear what those careers were. You said like 4 different careers. That's a lot for being a young man still. I mean, that's a lot. So what have those been?
Well, careers, some of them are careers. A couple of them were maybe more jobs. But I worked for, when I was 13, I worked for the city doing like sports stuff because I just really wanted to work. And then when I was 14, I started with Chick-fil-A, worked there for almost just right around 5 years. And then that was really fun. I was a daytime manager and helped open Highway 7 store and stuff like that. So really fun environment, great company. After that, I worked for Costco, which was also a great company, really fun. Worked there for about 4 years, I think. And I did almost every job you can do. That's what was awesome about it, is I just changed things up every few months, do a different position, learn something new. After that, I worked for RTD, which is a local transportation company here in Denver. And I did a bunch of stuff there as well. I was a bus driver, a mechanic apprentice, diesel mechanic, electromechanic, supervisor for the diesel in Aurora. And so that was fun. I had my shop had about 300 buses, and I had about 40 employees. So that was fun. And then from there, I went to a private, kind of more private company, which I was interested in that was Hirsch Precision. And so that's a machining company. And when I left there, I was the HR manager. So again, a lot of fun. It grew at least double the time I was there. I hired like 50 people in the last year and a half. So that was kind of, and then just here last summer, I started my own business doing home remodeling, handyman work, something I've been doing for about 8 years on the side and just loved. So, didn't want to sit at a desk anymore and realized, I should be doing this.
Wide variety.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of just different parts of that storyline will be relatable to different people who are tuning in.
Yeah.
But when you've made a change, I mean, was it intimidating sometimes to change into a brand new field?
Yeah, very. A couple of them were kind of like eased into it. Like I did 2 jobs for a while when I was first married, doing RTD and Costco, and then just kind of phased out of Costco just for schedule practicality. But yeah, luckily a lot of the changes I did was internal to a company, which was awesome. I took full advantage of the opportunities in a company without, so I'd do totally different things, but I was still working for Costco or RTD. So that was nice because it was less scary. But it seems like every 6 months I was in a totally new environment, learning something new, and that kept it fun for me, but very intimidating.
And what about this last venture, launching your own business? That had to be like a different kind of daunting.
That was, it was, long story short, I knew this was going to happen about 3 years ago. I love doing it and just kind of knew it was going to happen, but talked to my wife about it, and she was like, "Nah, this is not good for our family. This is not, a safe bet right now." And so I didn't push it. I've learned enough after 12 years of marriage. I just kind of let it go and just kept praying about it and kind of preparing for it. And then sure enough, I kept getting better at what I did and getting more experience. And then finally it kind of came up in a funny way. And she was like, "Yeah, let's do it. I think it's time." And so I was like, "I'm ready. Let's go." So as soon as she said that, I was terrified. Up until then, I was super confident. I'm like, "Yep, just say the word and we're going." And then as soon as she was on board, it was like, "Oh, this is real." So yeah, I'm still going through seasons with that of just fear and excitement and all that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And Jeff, you've made some pretty drastic career changes too.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think the only two, I guess I've worked in a bunch of weird jobs too. But I think a lot of people have, right? Like just you bounce from different job to different job. But I think the 2 big jobs I really think about is like, when I first finished at college and then I graduated, like my first job, was working in finance. Generally in finance and which was good. I really loved that actually. I think it's a great field to be in. I think it's so fun.
Yeah.
I love working with numbers and working with just money. I think it's a great time. But yeah, so making a change from that to working at a church with like high school and middle school students, that totally is a weird change.
Yeah.
Totally unrelated basically. But so it was a big job change, but it was like an exciting change I think for me. But also the challenge of like being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm not an expert in this. I don't know. I think some people that's really intimidating. It was intimidating for me, I think in a lot of ways, but I was also really excited about that. I think I love the idea of a job change because I love learning new things. Like when you're talking about Ashton about, being at the same company for like however many years, but doing something different every 6 months, that I hear that I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. I love that. Cause I think that's what makes it exciting is when you're learning new things and you're trying new stuff and learning new skills. And I think that's what is super helpful.
Yeah.
So,
well, speaking of change, if there's anyone listening or watching who is considering a job change, maybe a reason we consider that is our current job is maybe not going so well, or it's difficult, challenging in some way. But how do you know if that means, yeah, I need to get out of here and do something else? Versus, I mean, sometimes don't we need to hang in there, stick with it? So how do you tell which is which?
Yeah, that's really hard.
Yeah.
I think because like jobs are so context specific, right? Like it could be just that you don't like the job, or it could be that you hate your boss, or it could be that you don't like the hours. I mean, there's so many factors at play, and knowing how to know when to stick with it and when to quit is really hard. Yeah. What do you think, Ashton? Why do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of it you have to keep in mind. I think your short-term and long-term goals when it comes to career changes, because having something in mind, if depending on where you're at in your life, with kids or marriage or single or anything like that, setting some goals out and saying, I want to, get to this position, or I want to gain this kind of experience. Keeping that in mind can be helpful, and not saying that can't change, but I think sometimes the reasons, at least I saw when I was HR manager, people would get frustrated with something, and it could have been that day or that week or that month or whatever. And so I would challenge people, like, is this just something you're afraid of or isn't going well? Basically, like, do you need to just be brave? Do something hard. And it's hard to do that, especially, in our culture. It's like, well, just change, just do something else and drop it. And sometimes that can be healthy, but I always try to question, are you avoiding an issue? Like, is this something that, of course, if it's dangerous, right, or illegal,
Right.
in Jeff's case, like, you
Right.
should probably get out of there, like,
Yeah.
get out of that scam. But if it's just something difficult, like, they're in every job. And so of all the jobs and people I've worked with, there's some, commonalities that keep coming up. And sometimes it's just sticking with it, being brave, figuring out how to solve that problem. Not saying later on you can't leave and go, well, that was, I'm glad I learned that, but I'm still, going to move on. But just avoiding issues, I think, is an unhealthy reason.
Yeah. I've heard someone say leave on a good day,
Yeah.
not on, your worst day.
Yep.
Is in the old second guess. Was it an emotional decision? Was I just unwilling to face something that it would have been healthier to try to face
Yes.
at first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a challenge, though, for people to identify, even if they're avoiding something? Like, because one of the things we've talked about before on the podcast is like kind of some reflection. I think trying to like identify what's going on, and I feel like it's hard for people to identify if they're avoiding an issue or not. Or if they're trying to, or if they're just like, oh, it's just time. Like, how do you navigate that? How do you identify that?
Yeah.
Because that's a hard thing to do, I think, for a lot of people.
I bet it was valuable for, in your case when you were in HR, Ashton, for you to bring it up with
Yeah.
people. Maybe they hadn't thought about it,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, talking it out, because sometimes just like you say, not leaving on a bad day, like going through a tough season or a bad day, it can just feel like kind of panicky, and so we make bad decisions when we panic. So talking it out with people, I think, is really helpful. My wife, she knows my patterns and seasons now. And so every, she says, every 4 or 5 years, I change careers completely. And so, if I start talking about something before then, she'll kind of challenge me like, well, it's kind of early. You've only been there like a year, what's going on? So I think talking it out and kind of getting to the root of it, and also if you have like a good working relationship with your boss or coworkers, talking it out with those folks too, because sometimes there's just something you don't see yet if you're a trainee. It's really hard to see, some of the benefits of a company or whatever, because you're in the trenches of learning it and doing it. And so kind of realizing, oh, this is going to be for a few months, and then I'll be kind of on my own or whatever you took that job for.
Yeah, kind of at the core of what you're saying is if you can communicate about it, like think through it personally and with other people, that's what's going to help. And that sounds like your wife is a very helpful sounding board for these things.
For sure.
This is not the time to start that business.
Yeah.
Oh, now is a good time, and that's been helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So as guys, we're all guys here, and this could be true for the ladies as well, but I think maybe it's certainly true of most guys. We really tie our identity to our job or our career. Would you say that's true? And is that a good thing or a bad thing, or maybe some of each? Maybe there's a healthy way to think about it. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think for the most part, I think there's benefits to both, I guess. I think like there's something really good about being committed somewhere, wherever you're working, being like really committed there. Because if you're not committed, then it's really hard to do a good job, right?
Yeah.
Like if you just hate where you're working and you're just like, yeah, whatever, it's just my 9 to 5, and then you like live to go home, I think there can be a danger of like not putting in effort as much as maybe you should, because all you're thinking about is getting out of there. And so you don't really give that much effort. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, when that's everything, I think we sacrifice way too much in our life for it. Like when we're putting our family second and stuff like that, I think that's when our identity, like if our identity is our job, like I think it's a problem, because it starts to consume us. And I mean, being a workaholic is like a thing, right? Where it's like a problem, and it can really just start to erode all our relationships. So I think if you're gonna swing one way or the other, is bad. Probably being in the middle somewhere. I mean, anytime we put our identity in something like a job that's temporary, that's a problem anyway, I think, because it's gonna fail us at some point, and
Yes.
so we're gonna lose it, and then where are we? Then we're identityless.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem.
That makes sense.
But yeah, what do you think, Ashton?
I think so. For me personally, I'm a believer, and so I believe in the Bible, and I think that it says, God created us to work. He created man to work, so I think work is a blessing. I really do, and it's not always fun. In fact, that was part of the curse. It says that work is now going to be more difficult, unfortunately. So, but I think we're created to work. I think that it becoming part of our identity can be healthy for that reason, and because it's a blessing to us, it's a blessing to our family, those around us, especially, Jeff, like you said, when we're passionate about it, we're just sort of putting in time, it can really be a drain on a company, and being in like leadership at my last company, like that was tough when someone was just showing up and not pulling their weight. It's not healthy for anybody. Even, the whole like just society, it can be a problem. But I think it can get unhealthy really quickly because I create idols out of things. And so work becomes that for me. And in a very practical way, I went on paternity leave a couple months ago when our third son was born. And it was a long leave. It was like 5 weeks. And the first week I was like, well, who am I? Like, this is weird. Just not going to a job site, not picking up a tool for that long. It shook me a little bit, but so I think there was a little unhealthy attachment there, with my identity. So I think there's a balance to be had, but I don't think like totally saying, nope, I don't care about work, it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't think that's practical or healthy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what you just said about who am I right now while I'm not working, that's probably pretty relatable to a lot of people. So yeah, those feelings are real. We've kind of touched on if you like your job, it can consume you and become an idol. I guess another way that this is difficult, and this is a lot of my experience in my work life, is if it's the other extreme. I don't like my job. In that case, maybe you think differently about your identity, right? Like, I don't want this identity because I have a job that doesn't really feel like me, or maybe it's just a kind of a dead-end job that anybody could do, and you don't want it to define you. So, like in that case, that's another way where it's important for your identity to be found in not just your career, but in other things, right? And even if we love our job, and I do love my current job, we got to have some pursuits outside of work, right? If you have a family, clearly that your family is a priority.
Yep.
If you don't, it'd be good to have, like a hobby or two, something else that you give yourself to, so that, you're not just totally consumed. I really like what you said, Ashton, about the Bible is big on work. Like, we were made to work. Even before there was sin in the world, God had humanity work, and that was a good thing. Any other biblical instruction about what work is, or how to think in a healthy way about work?
Yeah, I mean, the passage I think of is like when Scripture talks about doing all things for God's glory, right? And like working for God and not as unto man, right? And so I think that piece of when we work, instead of being so focused on maybe like pleasing our boss or, whatever, like, or pleasing ourselves and things like that. Understanding that like when we work, we're supposed to honor God in that. And I think that's something I don't want to keep that in my mind. I don't want to think about that. Because that's a frustrating challenge, because that means I have to work harder. Because if I'm trying to like honor God, like, then that probably holds me to a higher standard than my boss, who's just going to let me, not at this job, but say maybe another job, who's going to just let me slack off. I think it puts another layer of emphasis on like, hey, no, like you should make an effort and you should do a good job because it's out of honor for God, not out of maybe pressure from your boss. But that also helps us get through those things. Like when we have a boss that we don't enjoy or a work environment that we don't like, we can understand like that even though we're not maybe happy in those circumstances, that like we can still honor God in that by persevering. And I think that's important. And I think like at your last job, Jamie, I'm just thinking about that. I mean, you put a lot of time in there and you really didn't like it, but I think that was glorifying to God by persevering and sticking in there and doing a really good job anyway,
The verse that I'm thinking of, maybe this is the one you're thinking of, Jeff, is where it says that we work as unto God and not unto men.
Yeah, did I quote that wrong? I think I did.
No, I think that's what you're referring to. And another thing that the Bible says about that is that when you do that, you're actually shining the light of Christ to the people you work with and the people you work for, right? Mm-hmm. So that's all of that. Yes, it's demanding on us, but in a really good way, right? It's motivating too. Yeah, it's inspiring. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ashton, any other Bible verses that come to mind?
Well, and if I could chime in on what you guys were saying too a little bit, there was somebody told me this a couple times recently. I don't remember who, but someone in my life. And, again, being a Christian, when I am working at customers' houses, I try to glorify God, like you're saying, Jeff, by doing a good job. And someone has repeated to me a couple times, like a way that a cobbler glorifies God is not by, etching a cross onto each shoe. It's by making the best shoes possible, So that's kind of like, that's what I try to do is, not just like, oh, I'm a Christian, so you should trust me, like, and, just hope that people go with that. I try to work really hard, have good reputation, right? Good references, things like that. And I think that glorifies God, like you just said. I don't have a whole lot. I mean, some of the verses we've kind of talked about already, I wrote down just because I like the source, so we can see that the Bible actually says it, because that's what I'm following. So Genesis 2:15, to paraphrase, work is part of what we were created for from the beginning, pre-fall, pre-sin. Genesis 3:17, work became more difficult due to the introduction of death, but the curse was not the work. I've heard that said sometimes, oh man, work was part of the curse, and that's not true. At least that's not what the Bible says. Ecclesiastes 2:24, work is a blessing. Again, paraphrase. Colossians 3:23 through 24, paraphrase, do every kind of work as good as you can as a service to the Lord. So that, to me, those are some verses that kind of came to mind, on this topic.
Yeah, good stuff. Very helpful. Yeah. So we have, some combined experience in a lot of different areas of work and making changes. And also we all, are young enough to remember entering the workforce as a kid. What would we say to somebody out there that's just getting into their career or thinking about how to pursue a career as a young person? Any advice that we would give them?
Yeah, I think to me, at my last company, I helped a lot of people with entry-level positions kind of figure out, where they wanted to go and things like that. And some really practical things would be, there's an assessment called the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment. So we used it a ton, and I did a lot of coaching through that. So that's a really practical way. I think it costs some money. It might be like $50 or something, but you can do it online. And it really, it just helps you kind of realize your strengths. And it was great for me. I took it even after years of being in the workforce and realized I am not detail-oriented. So I knew that, but it kind of called that out. Yeah. And so I had employees that worked for me that were. And so we worked really well together because I would, ask them to overlook things that I was doing for detail, and I would kind of look at large scope things for them. And my wife and I, same thing. We work well. She's very detail oriented. So that's just a really practical way that can lead you towards that.
Yeah, we've actually done that as a staff.
Okay.
In the past as well.
Yeah.
Those kind of tools can be very helpful.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Jeff? What would you say to a young person getting started on their career?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'd say is hold that career with an open hand. Like just know that, I think we put a lot of pressure on young people to like figure out their life early in life.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think that's like cool to give responsibility to young people. And also I think we're doing young people a disservice sometimes because we're like, you got to have your life figured out by the time you pick maybe a major in college. And I think that's like really bad advice.
Yes.
Because then people, go down this path and they hate their life because they are struggling with whatever they're working, towards. And it's like, man, just change what you're doing. Like, it's fine. And so I think like if we are really committed to like, I just have to stick in this career that I chose when I was 18, when I chose computer science major or whatever, like, I don't think that's really that helpful. Versus if we're like, hey, like I'm going to do this until, for a while. And I understand that it may be something I decide I don't love, or I don't feel like I fit well in here. And then I'm going to move to something else. I'll try something else. And when that time comes, man, just like be excited about it, be excited about trying something new and learning something new. Because I think when we stop learning stuff or when we stop being open to learning stuff, I think that's when we start to really spiral and it's bad for us.
Yeah. And if I could add on to that, Jeff, I think practically, and I've coached some people with this in the past. I think entering the workforce early, like you said, maybe before college. I'm not going to say that's for everyone, so that may be like debatable. But I've seen, just nowadays, really practically, being able to figure out what you actually enjoy first. Companies are doing a lot of on-the-job training, a ton.
Yeah.
There's tons of government money, grants going towards that. Companies will sometimes, I've had 2 companies help pay for my degrees. And so, there's just like, instead of kind of jumping into it, paying for it all or getting in debt and then having to, join the workforce, I think there's some other ways that are just kind of with the modern workforce that are really helpful to know. So, yeah, I think just working and not feeling like you're committed to this for the next 40 years can be helpful.
Yeah. That's a lot of pressure. Being like, I got to be here for 40 years till I retire. Like, that's so scary.
Yeah.
But I love what you said about entering the workforce and then figuring it out from there.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes you just stumble upon stuff. There have been jobs that I start working there, I'm like, oh, wow, like, I love doing this, Like, I worked at Ace Hardware building grills for a while, and I talk about it all the time because it was, like, the best, like, one of the best jobs ever.
Yeah.
I can't say it's the best job ever because I'm working here, and I actually do love working here more. But it was, like, so fun. I was like, oh, I love manual stuff where I'm, like, working with my hands and just, like, putting stuff together and stuff. It was a simple job, but it was, like, it helped me recognize something that I didn't maybe fully realize,
Yeah, that's interesting. Most of us probably know somebody who, when they were 5 years old, they knew what they wanted to do, and they've known it their whole life, and that was the trajectory, right? And I think maybe a lot of us feel like that's what the story is supposed to be for everybody, right? Like I did, and then I go to college for that, and then I enter that career, and I move up that ladder, and that's just how it goes. But I think that's very rare.
Yeah.
I think for a career path to really meander, trying stuff out, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
That could be a good thing. I'll add one other thing too, and that is that sometimes as young people, we can feel a little bit entitled to like be able to step right into a kind of prestigious or kind of cushy job. And we've got to be willing to just jump in there and get our hands dirty and be one of the minions for a while.
And for sure.
and get there. So just set aside that entitlement. And just get in there and be willing to work hard and not be an instant success.
Right.
Yeah, but I think a lot of times, like, this has been my experience, like if you have that attitude that you're describing, Jamie, and I love what you're saying, when you have that attitude and you start somewhere and you're just like, I'm going to be at the lowest rung, but I'm going to do such a good job at this lowest rung, like, people above you, like management stuff, they notice.
Yeah.
They notice. And then, that's how you get noticed for like being moved up into other positions naturally. And so like, I think sometimes we want to, just start at whatever, tier 3 or whatever. when maybe it's starting at tier 1 and just being a kick butt tier 1.
Yeah.
That can get you to those other spots way faster because they see you can work hard and you can learn and figure it out. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I think too, I did a lot of interviewing and hiring at my last company, and it's just so practical. I mean, if someone came in fresh out of college, with an awesome looking degree, I mean, honestly, we just kind of we rarely went that direction for higher level positions. We were looking for somebody who could come in, learn the company from the ground up, work really hard, even without a degree sometimes. Sometimes they'd do a degree in tandem with their work experience. But that's what I've interviewed hundreds of people, and those are the people that succeeded really well, and also that we noticed quickly and moved up quickly were people that just wanted to work hard in whatever they were doing. And sometimes they didn't love it, and we knew that, but we, would try to be clear with expectations, and they would meet them. Man, they moved up quick, and they got all the opportunities we could afford them.
Yeah. Speaks to, not to go on this, personal mission here, but I think people overestimate the importance of a college degree. I think.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times there are companies who are willing to give somebody a shot, if they are hardworking.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Not that college degrees don't matter, but I think they're better at to be a resource after you kind of are figuring something out, rather than it's like cart before the horse. I think it's better to just start working somewhere and then see if that a degree will help you in whatever field you're in first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother thing. I'm not trying to go there.
Well, I think what's important that you're saying is sometimes we view getting a college degree as kind of the only route.
Right.
And it can be a route. It's the route I took, and it worked well, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
There's other ways.
Yep.
Yeah. I think this has been a really valuable conversation. Final takeaways from what we've been talking about. Just a final thought you want to leave people with. Ashton, let's start with you.
Yeah. So I think, as far as changing careers or entering a career, I think, some of the things we've said that I really, want to reiterate is why, looking at why you want to do something. Is it, like we said, the prestige, Jamie, like you were mentioning, are you willing to work your way into that, or are you kind of expecting to just jump into it? So just having a realistic expectation for, position and title and all that. And I think talking to something I didn't really mention explicitly, but would like to bring up is talking to peers and mentors. So when I started my own business, it was a huge step for me. I mean, like I said earlier, I was pretty scared. And so I talked to at least 3 or 4 people that had done it. And they all validated, the type of work I was doing, my skills, gave me some advice on how to do that. So, and there was many other peers I talked to that just kind of do you think this would work? Am I good at this? Just kind of getting that advice. So there's wisdom in much counsel, like some verse says that I don't have written down. But I think, don't make those decisions in solitude, I think is the main takeaway too.
That's huge, yeah. A theme that we keep noticing as we talk about various issues on the podcast is community is so vital,
Yeah.
Having peers, not just, your buddies who will tell you what you want to hear, but friends that have valuable input and mentor figures who can give you some wisdom.
And two, if you're married, your spouse. I mean, it may seem obvious, but I've tried, as I've been married for a while now, to learn. I don't make any major life decision without my wife kind of validating or feeling led as well. And so when she wasn't ready, I just tried to trust and say, okay, God, I'll wait for you. But man, to force your spouse into something that they're not ready for, that's not usually recommended.
Right.
Even if it's just discomfort, just being on the same page, maintaining that unity, way more important than that awesome job that you got to have or that title. So talking to your spouse too.
Yeah,
that's great.
Really good.
Jeff, how about you? Final thoughts?
I'd say to me the big thing is just being open to change. And so when I was talking about holding things with an open hand earlier, I think that's a really important piece when we talk about careers. Understanding that life changes, things happen, life just happens to us sometimes. And so being willing to accept that hey, sometimes we're going to we just need to adapt to whatever change happens. And so and being understanding that that's coming and not being oh, this is exactly how my life is going to go and being so sure about that. I think that's really important. Yeah. What about you, Jamie?
Yeah, that's good. Along those lines, just a balanced view of what work is and what it isn't. I'm hearing a lot of parallels in this conversation to these principles are not just about our job, but it's about our life and how we think about who we are. And Scripture is really clear that our work doesn't totally define us. Our work, whether it's at our job or just our performance in life or what we accomplish, it's not what impresses God or gets us into a relationship with Him, right? None of that. Jesus did that for us. And yet it has a place, and we get to work not for that identity, but almost out of that identity, when we know Him. And that can be a very freeing thing. Well, I think these were really valuable insights. Thank you guys. Ashton, thanks for being on today, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and we'll see you next time on Deepish Thoughts.